answer your question, I think that actually the school board should direct policy, and the superintendent should enforce that. That's my perspective on it. However, I want to tell you this much: we recently acquired a new superintendent that I think is on the right track, and I'm 100% behind her.
Okay.
I think, Pat, you're right that right now policy is being driven by the superintendent. One of the roles of the school board is to provide oversight of the superintendent and to drive policy. The attitude of the school board the last few years has been simply, we'll do whatever the superintendent wants. Now that's a bit of a problem when you're playing musical superintendents. The average time a superintendent spends in a school district now is about 3 years. So once each new superintendent comes in, develops their policies and starts moving those policies forward, that superintendent's on the way out the door. Then we bring in a new superintendent who has new policies and new programs that they want to implement, and it takes us a year or 2 years to start implementing those policies and start making some type of difference, and as soon as we do, that superintendent is out the door. If we had a board that was driving the policy and we had to bring in a new superintendent, the board could bring in a superintendent that has the same philosophies and views as the board, and we can continue forward with the policies that we already have in place.
If I could interject in on 1 minute, and I'm sure you have too. You watched the two prior superintendents. They did nationwide searches for him. Spent $100,000 to bring him in, and it lasted a short period of time. But I watched the reaction of the school board members at that time, and it was like the knight in shining armor had arrived on the scene. They were bowed down, and to me, they just have it backwards. So that's why I'm glad this recent one was hired from within locally.
Well, I think the answer to the question about the role of the school board and the role of the principal, or the role of the superintendent rather, goes back to the previous question. The government I believe in is of the people, by the people, and for the people. And our founding fathers believed that with a good education, the people were the leaders. One of the reasons I ran is because I have a friend who's a master teacher. She's somebody that I see on a regular basis, and other teachers as well, who said that they weren't being listened to by the school board, and the school board was just going to do whatever they wanted to do anyway. So it's this flow that occurs. You get input at every grade level in every subject matter on a weekly or bi-weekly basis on what is happening, having Kaizen sessions or interactive shared responsibility groups with your community, with your teachers, with interested people, and with kids. Let's get 8th through 12th graders in, telling what's really going on, and helping us to frame policy by having a broader base of perspectives and possible answers. Then, on that basis, we determine policy. We determine what is going to work well to sustain an organization while effectively doing a mission and respecting the myriad of voices that are out there that need to drive it. And then on that basis, we do hire leaders. That's our superintendent is to be a leader. She's supposed to be the collective figurehead that rallies the troops and helps to verbalize the vision and keep us on track for a better future. That to me. And then you have all these wonderful volunteers who sit on this board who have business background and ethnic background, or maybe it's their characteristics of being able to listen well or stay cool under pressure or know about curriculum or just have a lot of contacts within the community. All these qualities. And of course the ability to research all your life and spend hundreds of hours doing volunteer work you're not paid for. I mean, those are the qualifications. So I think it has to start with the community, go to that board, and then from there the superintendent has this this interactive, wise and patient ways of building policy together.
Okay. Now, my understanding, there's been some policy changes, and Mr. Hoopenbecker, one of the changes that I've heard about is basically the St. Paul Public Schools has gone from a site-based allocation of resources and staffing decisions, and they've gone to that where the site allocates the staff versus the central administration. So what's your opinion on that? What do you think about that?
Well, the way things have been done the last good number of years is the school district would give an allocation to each school based on different formulas that they have, and then the principal would get together with the site council, which is a mix of parents, staff members, and some schools have some other community members involved, and they would look at that allocation and then decide what the needs of the school are based on that allocation. Teachers, you usually need a certain number of teachers to fit within staffing guidelines for per pupil for classrooms. But then schools would make decisions on what the other priorities are. Do we want a music specialist? Do we want, do we want a librarian? How do we want to staff that? How many teaching assistants do we want to have? And then the schools would, with the site councils and the principals would work that out so it would be the best fit for that particular school. The problem that we have coming up next year is that all of that staffing is going to be done by the central administration. The central administration is going to tell the schools, here's what you're getting, and that's it. Now, here's where one of those problems with that way of allocating resources to the schools is going to come in. I happen to have a daughter at Murray Junior High. They have a program over there called Pilot One-on-One Tutoring. The principal holds money out from his allocation, $20,000 is about the cost of the program, to tutor 50 kids that are struggling, mainly in math, but some in reading. Now, next year when the principal isn't given an allocation anymore, are we going to have that program at Murray, a very successful program? And these are the types of things where principals and site council members know what the needs of their school and are going to do a better job allocating that money than our central administration. We're also going to take parents and teachers further away from the decision-making process. And I see that as a real problem.
What do you think, Mr. Igo? Site allocation or centralized planning?
Well, Kenley, I think I'd like to listen to Liz's comments on that. I think that she's a teacher in the schools, and Kevin's in the schools daily, and they probably have more insight into that than I would at this point. But as was stated earlier, I am a good listener, and I'd base any decisions on that after hearing the two of them.
Okay, Mrs. Paulson?
There's a district-wide advisory team right now that is whose purpose is to make a decision about what the roles of site councils are going to be. So I would recommend that everybody make sure that they contact that advisory team and let them know what their opinions are and the nuances. Currently, we are moving very, very strongly in the area of managed instruction and managed allocations from the board. Over time, I think it's going to move back to center. My background as a Christian woman, I always taught, be moderate in all things. It's a wise way to go. So I'm hoping that it moves back towards the center. But I do agree with Kevin. If you're too far removed from the actual situation on the ground, you will not make as wise decisions. Soviet Russia, not that I'm equating our situation to Soviet Russia, kind of screwed up that way too. So the challenge is going to be to involve people, and if we are not allocating the same amount of funds to every school based on a larger amount of funds going to the schools right now that need more help, which is partially what's going on, then as members in our community, we're going to have to make sure our voices are heard, and/or we're going to have to be more creative in how we're getting those additional allocations. Or we're also going to have to lobby with the legislators.
Well, and the way things work now, if a school does come up with an
Can't fund it.
allocation, they still have to present that to their supervisor, their area superintendent at the school district. So it is being approved by the school district in the end, by central administration. But they're allowing the site councils and the principals to have some input on how that money is going to be spent in their schools and how you're going to fund certain programs.
Well,
So it's a matter, again, of making sure that we are very intentionally and very systematically coming up with a myriad of methods so that more people can have a voice in that, and so that we can come up with good solutions to what is a current problem while we're in the process of kind of seeing how well this experiment works. I
Well,
mean, give it a couple
right.
years, see if it floats, and then it'll start.
Well, I
moving
think it's
back.
interesting because people do say, hey, I have this viewpoint, we should have more centralized, or I have this viewpoint, we should be more local. And really, I mean, you can't, in my opinion, you just can't set a policy to be just one way or the other. It's got to be both.
Right, it really does.
And it sounds like what you guys are saying is we got to have this communication just going up and down the line the whole time, and be able to receive the communication.
Right, and a problem too with having everything made by, all these decisions made by the board, is that quite frankly, we've got a multi-million-dollar budget. It becomes very easy to spend $6 million without thinking that maybe there was a $2 million alternative. Now, I'm telling you, when I heard about that, I thought, $4 million? How many tutors could that pay for? How many teachers? I could bring SMART in. I could train how many teachers with $500 where they are really having good training. I want the money to go towards instruction and curriculum and partnerships with communities that are enabling our teachers, our children. I want to go towards technology. I want to make sure it's going towards the kids. And if we get too used to a multi-million-dollar budget, that we are individualizing programs that don't need to be individualized because they already exist out there, or we're adding on another administrator, another staff person, that, I'm sorry, you show me the benefit that it's had to student learning and I will support that, but until you do that, I'd rather have those teachers that are on the ground. I want them to be having monetary incentives for teaching better. I want them to be having the tools. I want them having the training to use smart boards so they can use them really well. All these other things. That's the bottom line. The money, we have got to stay in tune, hearing the voices and implementing wisdom that is not so centrally located that we don't even don't know what suffering we're causing at the levels that it's going on. And we can't keep asking taxpayers for more either when we're wasting.
It's not the $4 million program or even the $2 million program. We have a couple of issues right now with allocations from the school board that are a lot less than that can do a lot of good in the schools. We're going to pay our superintendent $40,000 to move from Woodbury to St. Paul. A person who's worked in our school district for over 20 years. But the board's going to feel better if the superintendent lives in St. Paul. We just spent another $175,000 on recess coaches.
$160,000, yeah, outsourced for recess.
And I really appreciate the objective, but they haven't told me whether or not they took any multiple. How many bids did you take? How many volunteers did you ask to come in before you made that decision? With
a $630 million annual budget, bigger than Ramsey County or bigger than the city of St. Paul, I suspect $140,000 is a drop in the bucket to them, you know, and that's why they need a little fiscal responsibility down there, and I don't think they have it. I know they don't have it.
Well, I laid out for the board. I sent a letter to the board members on the $40,000 in relocation money that they're still approving for the superintendent. And it doesn't sound like a lot of money when you're talking about a $630 million budget. But for $40,000, you can put 2 teaching assistants in the schools. Those are in classrooms to help teachers. You could hire 4 retired teachers that come in and help in the classrooms. And the best thing, let me go back to the tutoring program at Murray Junior High. We have some volunteers that come in, and other tutors are paid $11 an hour to come in and help our kids that are struggling. You could get 3,600 hours of tutoring for $40,000. Now, you pick any of those options, they're better than paying the superintendent to move from Woodbury to St. Paul.